The days passed in an uneasy rhythm, each one blending into the next. Evelyn spent most of her time in the manor, investigating the curse, the mysterious figures, and the strange happenings that seemed to follow her wherever she went. She kept to herself, speaking only when necessary and maintaining a careful distance from the Duke. But as the days wore on, she began to notice something she couldn't ignore. Despite his cold exterior, the Duke was always there when she needed him most. It happened on a particularly stormy night, the kind where the winds howled through the ancient halls of Ravenspire, rattling the windows and shaking the walls. Evelyn had ventured outside to the gardens, eager for some fresh air to clear her mind. The rain had started lightly, but by the time she reached the edge of the estate, it was pouring, drenching her to the bone. She turned to return to the manor, but before she could take a step, a sharp sound pierced the night, footsteps approaching rapidly. Evelyn whipped around only to be greeted by the sight of the Duke, his dark figure outlined by the storm, his coat billowing behind him as he rushed toward her. "Lady Evelyn, what are you doing out here?" His voice was as cold as the wind, but his eyes were sharp, concerned. "I needed to clear my head," she replied, trying to sound nonchalant, though she was drenched and shivering. "I'll be fine." He didn't respond, instead pulling off his cloak and draping it over her shoulders. She froze, taken aback by the gesture. She had never seen him act so protective. "You're soaked," he said, his voice softer now, almost unrecognizable from the usual detached tone. "Come inside before you catch a cold." Before she could protest, he had already taken her arm gently, guiding her back toward the manor with a surprising tenderness. Despite his usual aloofness, his touch lingered just a moment longer than necessary, a spark of something unspoken passing between them. Once they were inside, he didn't let go of her arm immediately, his gaze locked on hers. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched between them, thick with something unspoken. "I thank you," she said finally, the words coming out quietly. He nodded curtly, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Something more than just the coldness she had come to expect from him. "I will not have you put yourself in danger. Not while you're here." His voice was low and firm, but there was an underlying protectiveness that she hadn't noticed before. Evelyn studied him carefully, 1,000 questions running through her mind. Why was he like this? Why had he suddenly started looking out for her? Was it guilt over the curse, or was it something more? As the days passed, their interactions continued to shift. Evelyn's wit and fearless attitude seemed to pique the Duke's interest in ways she hadn't anticipated. Where others might have been cowed by his presence, she met him with defiance and sharp comments, not letting his cold nature intimidate her. And over time, the walls he had so carefully built around himself began to show cracks. One afternoon, she found herself in the manor's library, flipping through yet another dusty tome in search of answers. She had been trying to decipher the old texts about the curse when she heard the soft click of the door opening. She turned to find the Duke standing in the doorway, his arms folded, his usual guarded expression in place. But this time, there was a spark of something more. Curiosity, perhaps, or something else. "You're still searching for answers," he remarked dryly, his eyes flicking over the open pages of the book. "Do you really believe the curse can be broken?" "I don't know," Evelyn admitted, meeting his gaze with a steady look. "But I have to try. I'm not just going to stand by and wait for fate to decide." He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "And what if you fail? What if you end up just like the others?" Evelyn set the book down with a soft thud, her expression serious. "Then at least I'll know I fought. I won't go down without a fight, Duke Valenhart." For a moment, the Duke said nothing, his gaze piercing, as if evaluating her. Then, with a small sigh, he walked over to the fireplace, the tension between them growing with every step. "Perhaps," he began, his voice softer than usual. "That's what I admire about you, Lady Evelyn. You're not afraid to challenge me, to question everything. The others, they always bent to my will." Evelyn raised an eyebrow, intrigued by his words. "So I'm different?" He gave a brief, almost imperceptible nod. "Yes, and that intrigues me." She felt a strange warmth in her chest at his admission, but she quickly masked it with a smirk. "Well, I'm not so easily intimidated, Your Grace." The Duke met her smirk with one of his own, though it was faint and fleeting. For the first time in weeks, she saw a genuine flicker of amusement in his eyes. "Maybe not," he said, his tone lighter. "But don't mistake that for an invitation to continue pushing my buttons." Evelyn chuckled, feeling the tension between them shift. "I can't help it, it's just too easy." And for a moment, they were two people, standing in the same room, sharing a quiet moment of understanding and unspoken trust. It wasn't much, but it was a start. As she left the library, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was changing between them. She wasn't sure if it was the slow build of mutual respect, or if it was the beginning of something deeper, something that neither of them was ready to face. But Evelyn knew one thing for sure. She was no longer just a pawn in the Duke's world. She was a part of it, whether he wanted it or not. The fog outside Ravenspire Manor had thickened, shrouding the estate in an eerie veil of mist. Evelyn stood in front of the massive fireplace, the warmth from the crackling fire doing little to ease the chill running through her veins. She had spent countless hours poring over books, letters, and ancient texts, all in an attempt to uncover the true nature of the curse that had haunted the Ravenspire bloodline for generations. But today, everything changed. It all began with the discovery in the Duke's private study, a room she had never dared enter before. The heavy oak door had remained locked, a silent reminder that the Duke valued his privacy above all else. But with growing urgency, Evelyn had found a way inside. There, tucked in the back corner of an old wooden chest, she found an ancient journal. The leather cover was cracked with age, and the pages were fragile, almost too delicate to touch. But as she flipped through it, the story began to unravel. The journal belonged to the Duke's great-great-grandfather, Sir Edmund Ravenspire, a man whose reputation was steeped in mystery. His writings spoke of a forbidden love affair, one that had taken place long before the curse had ever been mentioned. And as Evelyn read the words of Sir Edmund, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Sir Edmund had once been in love with a powerful sorceress named Isolde, a woman whose magic was said to rival the gods themselves. They had met under mysterious circumstances, their bond growing stronger with each passing day, but their love was not meant to be. As the journal detailed, Sir Edmund had betrayed Isolde in a moment of weakness, choosing power over love. Desperate to keep his family's legacy intact, he had broken his promise to her, sealing his fate and that of every generation to come. Isolde, heartbroken and furious, had cursed the Ravenspire bloodline in her final act of vengeance. She cast a spell so powerful that it could not be undone by time or distance, binding the family's future to a tragic fate. The curse was simple. Any woman who dares to love a Ravenspire Duke will die, and the Duke himself will remain cursed until the bloodline is freed. Evelyn's heart raced as she processed the truth. The curse wasn't just a random stroke of bad luck. It was a direct consequence of betrayal, a betrayal that had condemned generations of Ravenspire men to a life of solitude and pain. But there was something more troubling that Evelyn had uncovered. According to Sir Edmund's journal, the curse could only be broken if one of the Ravenspire bloodline willingly gave up their heart, sacrificed their love for the curse to lift. And that sacrifice had to be made by someone who loved them truly, deeply, someone who had the courage to face the darkness that had haunted the family for centuries. The words from the ancient tome she had discovered echoed in her mind. A heart must be given willingly, freely given. She could feel the weight of the words pressing down on her chest. This wasn't just about the Duke's curse. It was about a choice, a terrible, irrevocable decision that someone would have to make to break the curse. And that someone could very well be her. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. Evelyn quickly tucked the journal back into the chest, closing it just as the door creaked open. The Duke entered the room, his presence commanding as always, though there was a faint trace of weariness in his eyes. He hadn't spoken much about the curse, and when he did, it was with a certain bitterness, as though the weight of his family's past was more than he could bear. "I found something," Evelyn said, her voice steady, though her heart was racing. "I believe I understand what's happening with your family. The curse, it's tied to your ancestor, Sir Edmund." The Duke's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening. "I warned you not to look into it. There are things you're better off not knowing." "I don't care about your warnings, Your Grace," Evelyn replied firmly, her gaze meeting his. I need to know the truth." He hesitated for a moment, his posture stiff, before slowly walking toward her. "Fine. Tell me what you've learned." Evelyn took a deep breath and explained everything. The betrayal of Sir Edmund, the sorceress Isolde, and the curse that had bound the Ravenspire family for generations. The air between them grew thick with tension as she spoke, and by the time she finished, the Duke was silent, his expression unreadable. "So," he said finally, his voice low and dangerous, "this curse, this tragedy." Evelyn shook her head. "No, it's not your fault. Your ancestor made a choice that led to this curse. But that doesn't mean it's over. The curse can be broken. We can break it." The Duke's gaze softened, his usual cold demeanor slipping just a fraction. "And how do you propose we do that?" Evelyn's eyes met his, and for the first time she saw a flicker of something in his expression. Something vulnerable, something afraid. "I don't know yet," she admitted. "But I will find a way. You don't have to suffer because of something your ancestor did." The silence between them stretched, thick with unspoken words. Then, finally, the Duke spoke again, his voice quieter than it had ever been. "And what if the price of breaking the curse is too high? What if the sacrifice is too much?" Evelyn didn't answer right away. She couldn't. She didn't have the answers yet, and she wasn't sure she ever would. But one thing was certain. She couldn't leave him to face the curse alone. "We'll figure it out," she said softly, the weight of their shared journey settling between them, together. As she looked at him, the distance between them seemed to shrink, and in that quiet moment, Evelyn realized that despite the dark history that bound them, despite the curse that loomed over them both, something more had begun to grow. A bond, a connection, perhaps even something stronger. And though the road ahead would be fraught with danger, she knew that together they could face it. The moon hung high over the estate, its silver light casting long, eerie shadows across the grounds of Ravenspire Manor. Evelyn stood at the large window of her room, staring out at the garden below, her mind swirling with the weight of what she had uncovered. The curse, the betrayal, the secrets buried in the past, everything had been leading to this moment. She had been reincarnated into this time, into the life of Lady Evelyn Darcy, not by mere chance. It was no coincidence that she had been brought back to this particular place, to this particular family. No, it was something far deeper, something far more significant. Evelyn now understood the true reason behind her reincarnation. She wasn't here by accident. She was here because she was the key to breaking the curse. The realization hit her like a wave, powerful and sudden. Her mind had been clouded with questions, with confusion, but now everything was clear. She had been a forensic scientist in her previous life for a reason, to uncover truths, to solve mysteries, to analyze the unexplainable. And now in this life she had been given the ultimate puzzle to solve, the curse of the Ravenspire bloodline. She had already begun to piece together the puzzle, the betrayal of Sir Edmund Ravenspire, the curse cast by the sorceress Isolde, the tragic love stories that followed. But there was more, so much more. There were pieces missing, threads that hadn't yet been untangled, and the supernatural forces that had bound the family for centuries were not about to let her uncover them so easily. As she stood there, a strange sensation washed over her, an unsettling feeling, as if the very air around her had thickened, become heavier. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end, and she instinctively took a step back from the window, her heart pounding. The whispers came then, soft at first, like the rustle of leaves in the wind. But as they grew louder, they became more distinct. The voices weren't just whispers, they were commands, and they were warning her. "Leave it alone, Lady Evelyn. You are not meant to know. You will die, just like the others." She froze, her breath catching in her throat. The voice that spoke to her was not her own. It was not the voice of a person she knew. It was the voice of something ancient, something powerful. And it was telling her to stop. But Evelyn couldn't stop. Not now. She had come too far, and the truth was within her reach. The voices intensified, swirling around her like a tempest rising in the room. She clasped her hands over her ears, trying to block them out, but they only grew louder, more insistent. "You will fail. The curse cannot be broken. It is too powerful. Leave now and live." She stumbled back, panic rising in her chest. The room felt suffocating, as though the very walls were closing in on her. and then just as suddenly as they had started, the voices ceased, leaving only the sound of her frantic breathing in the silence. Eveline collapsed onto the bed, her hands trembling. This was no longer just a mystery. It was something far darker, something more sinister. The curse had power, power that seemed to seep into every corner of the estate, into her very bones. She could feel it now, pressing down on her, suffocating her. But she refused to give in. Eveline knew what she had to do. She had to go deeper, uncover the final truth, no matter the cost. She couldn't let fear stop her now, not when she was so close. The next day, she set out to find the forbidden book she had read about in Sir Edmund's journal. It was said to contain the darkest secrets of the Ravenspire bloodline, secrets that no one dared to reveal. The book was hidden in a locked chamber within the manor, a place so forbidden that even the servants whispered about it. But Eveline was no longer intimidated. She was determined. As she made her way through the corridors of Ravenspire Manor, she couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was watching her. Every corner she turned, every step she took, she felt a presence lurking in the shadows, waiting for her to make a mistake. When she finally reached the chamber, she hesitated for only a moment. The door was old and covered in intricate carvings, the symbols on it dark and foreboding. She had heard the rumors, the ones that spoke of the chamber's dark magic, the ancient powers it contained. But she couldn't stop now. With a steady hand, she pushed open the door and stepped inside. The room was small, its air thick with the smell of dust and old paper. There were shelves filled with faded scrolls and worn books. But Eveline's eyes immediately fixed on the ancient tome that sat in the center of the room. It was large, its cover made of dark leather, etched with symbols she didn't recognize. She approached it cautiously, the hairs on the back of her neck prickling as she reached out to touch the book. The moment her fingers made contact with the cover, a jolt of electricity shot through her and the room seemed to shift. For a brief moment she felt disoriented, as though the very fabric of time had bent around her. She steadied herself and opened the book, flipping through the brittle pages with a mixture of awe and fear. The book contained a detailed account of the curse, but it was far more than just a story. It was a manual, a guide to breaking the curse. And the key, Eveline realized, was her. The truth was finally revealed. She wasn't just a participant in this curse. She was the catalyst. The Reincarnation, the one who had been brought here to break the cycle, to end the tragic fate that had plagued the Ravenspire family for centuries. But as she read on, another chilling detail emerged. The curse could not be broken by knowledge alone. The supernatural forces tied to the curse would stop anyone from uncovering the truth. Or worse, they would manipulate the one who sought it, twisting their fate in the process. Eveline's breath caught in her throat. The power she had been searching for, the power to break the curse, wasn't just a matter of research. It was a matter of will, of strength, of sacrifice, and she would need every ounce of both if she was to succeed. The darkness of the night seemed to stretch on forever, an unyielding void that swallowed everything around Ravenspire Manor. A storm had rolled in, its winds howling through the trees, and the sky above crackled with a foreboding energy. The atmosphere felt charged, as if the very earth itself was holding its breath. Eveline stood at the edge of the estate's cliffside garden, staring into the turbulent sea below. Her thoughts were a whirlwind, a storm of their own, as she grappled with the truth she had uncovered, the truth that had been kept hidden for centuries. The curse wasn't just a twisted legacy of betrayal. It wasn't just the result of Sir Edmund's unfaithfulness to Isolde the sorceress. No, there was something more. Something far older and far more dangerous. The true cause of the curse, Eveline had discovered, was still alive. A being far older than the Ravenspire family itself, an immortal entity bound by vengeance and dark magic, one who had been feeding off the sorrow and suffering of the Ravenspire bloodline for centuries. This being was not a mere spirit or ghost. It was a creature of pure malice, a force that transcended time. Its name had been lost to history, but its existence had never truly ended. It was the one who had placed the curse upon the Ravenspire family, the one who had manipulated everything, every death, every tragedy, and it was now drawing closer. Eveline's heart raced as she turned toward the sound of footsteps behind her. The Duke emerged from the shadows, his expression grim. his eyes reflecting the same mixture of determination and dread that had been consuming her for days. The air around him seemed to shift, his presence both comforting and terrifying at the same time. "We need to talk," Evelyn said, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "I've learned something that changes everything." The Duke stepped closer, his gaze never leaving hers. He could sense the gravity of the situation, even without knowing the full details. "Tell me. I need to know what's happening." "The curse, it's not just a consequence of your ancestors' betrayal," Evelyn began, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's a being, an immortal creature. It's the one who cursed your family in the first place. It's been feeding off the bloodline's misery for centuries, using the pain and death to sustain itself." The Duke's eyes darkened, his jaw tightening as he absorbed the news. "And you think it's still alive?" "I know it is." Evelyn's words cut through the tension like a blade. "I've felt it. It's been watching us, manipulating events, ensuring that the curse remains in place." For a long moment, the Duke said nothing. His gaze drifted to the horizon, the weight of his family's curse pressing down on him. "How do we stop it?" Evelyn hesitated, the enormity of their task sinking in. "To break the cycle, we have to confront it, face the source of the curse. But doing so will require a sacrifice, a great one." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. The Duke turned to face her, his expression hardening. "What kind of sacrifice?" "The kind that costs everything," she said, her voice tinged with sorrow. "The creature's power is tied to love, specifically to the love between the Ravenspire Dukes and the women they've been cursed to love. The only way to break the curse is to sever that bond, to release the immortal being from its hold. But to do that, one of us must give up their love completely. It's the only way to break the cycle." The Duke's face paled, his fists clenched at his sides. "You mean one of us has to give up our feelings? Let go of everything?" Evelyn nodded, her heart aching at the thought. "It's the only way. We'll have to face it together, but one of us will need to make the ultimate sacrifice. I'm not sure who that will be." The Duke's eyes locked onto hers, his gaze intense and unwavering. "I will not let you sacrifice yourself. Not after everything you've done to help me. I refuse." Evelyn could feel the sincerity in his words, the weight of his devotion. But she knew this wasn't something that could be decided on emotions alone. This was a battle that required strength, and more than that, acceptance of the inevitable. "We don't have a choice," Evelyn said, her voice breaking slightly. "The curse has already taken so much from your family. If we don't act, it will never end. I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I can't leave this world in the hands of a creature that thrives on pain." The Duke's expression faltered, pain flickering in his eyes. But then, after a long silence, he stepped forward, taking her hands in his grip firm. "Then we do it together. I won't allow you to face this alone. If I must sacrifice everything, I will. But I will not lose you." Tears welled in Evelyn's eyes as she looked up at him. There was no turning back now. The path ahead was steeped in uncertainty, filled with dangers and sacrifices, but together they would face the darkness, no matter what it cost. The wind howled around them, and for a brief moment, Evelyn felt as though the very forces of nature were conspiring against them. But then something shifted in the air, a shift in the balance, as if the world itself had taken notice. They were ready. With renewed resolve, the Duke and Evelyn turned toward the manor, knowing that the final confrontation awaited them. They would confront the immortal being, the true villain, and break the curse once and for all. But as they made their way back to the manor, a chilling thought lingered in Evelyn's mind. Would they survive the sacrifice? Would they be strong enough to face the darkness that had haunted the Ravenspire family for centuries? Only time would tell. The air inside the ancient chamber felt heavy, suffused with a dark energy that seemed to pulse with every beat of Evelyn's heart. The walls of the hidden tower were lined with dark symbols, their meaning lost to time, but their power unmistakable. The flickering light of torches cast long shadows stretching across the cold stone floor. Evelyn stood at the center of the room, her hands clenched into fists, her mind swirling with the impossible choice that lay before her. Beside her stood the Duke of Ravenspire, his expression dark and resolute, but there was a flicker of hesitation in his eyes. The sacrifice they had discussed, the one that would end the curse, had now become a cruel reality. The immortal being, the true villain who had cursed the Ravenspire bloodline for centuries, loomed before them, its form shifting and flickering like smoke in the air. It had no true shape, no face, but its presence was palpable, an overwhelming force that made the very air feel thick with despair. Its voice echoed in their minds, deep and hollow. "You cannot break the curse," it intoned, its voice both ancient and knowing. "The bloodline of Ravenspire belongs to me. You are nothing but pawns in a game you cannot hope to win. There is no escape from your fate." Evelyn's heart pounded in her chest. She could feel the weight of its words, the crushing finality of the creature's statement. But she couldn't let that stop her. Not now. Not after everything they had endured. She had already come too far to back down. With a deep breath, Evelyn stepped forward, her gaze steady. "We are not pawns," she said, her voice strong, cutting through the oppressive darkness. "We will break this curse, no matter what it costs." The creature's laughter echoed through the chamber, a sound so chilling it made her blood run cold. "You still do not understand, do you?" it mocked. "The curse is not just the loss of love. It is the very fabric of your existence, tied to the lives of those before you. You are here because you are the key, the reincarnation of Isolde, the very sorceress who cursed the Ravenspire bloodline. It is in your blood. It is in your soul. And no matter how much you try to defy it, you are bound to this curse forever." Evelyn's breath hitched, and for a moment, the world around her seemed to blur. The truth was staggering. A revelation so profound it threatened to shatter everything she thought she knew. She had been reincarnated not as some random soul caught in the wrong body, but as Isolde herself, the very sorceress whose betrayal had started it all. She had been brought back not to fix the curse, but to face the consequences of her own past actions. The shock of the revelation left her frozen, but only for a moment. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. She had been Isolde. She had once loved Edmund Ravenspire, and her love had driven her to curse his bloodline for eternity. But could this truly be her destiny? Was it possible for her to break free from the chains of her past self? The Duke stepped closer, his hand reaching for hers, grounding her in the moment. "Evelyn," he said softly, his voice laced with determination, "I don't care who you were. I care who you are now. You're not Isolde, you're Evelyn, and together we can break this." The creature recoiled, its form flickering with agitation. "You dare defy me?" it hissed. "You are bound to me, to this curse. You cannot escape." Evelyn felt the power of the creature's words trying to push her back, to drag her into the depths of despair. But she refused to yield. With every ounce of her will, she held her ground. She was not the same person she had been in her past life. She was stronger, she was different, and she would not let the mistakes of Isolde's life define her. She turned to the Duke, her heart filled with love and resolve. "We have one chance to break this, but it requires a sacrifice. A choice must be made." The Duke's eyes darkened, his lips pressing into a thin line. He had known this moment was coming, but hearing it aloud was a different matter entirely. "What are you asking, Evelyn?" Evelyn swallowed hard, the weight of the decision bearing down on her. "I must sever the bond between us. I must give up my love for you, just as the curse demands. It is the only way to break the cycle." The Duke's eyes flickered with a flash of hurt, but his expression remained steady. "You're asking me to let you go?" His voice was barely above a whisper, raw with emotion. "I'm not asking you to let me go," she whispered back, her voice trembling. "I'm asking us to choose something greater, something that will set us both free. If we can sever the bond of love, the curse will break. We will both be free. But if we don't, if we allow this bond to remain, the curse will never end, and it will claim us both." For a moment, they stood in silence, the weight of the choice hanging between them like an immovable force. The creature watched, its presence pressing in on them, eager to see who would falter. Then, slowly, the Duke stepped forward, his face set in determination. "If we must sacrifice something," he said, his voice strong and steady, "then I will sacrifice my love for you, because I would rather see you live, even if it means never having you by my side." Evelyn's heart ached, but she nodded. The decision had been made. The bond between them would be severed and the curse would be broken. They would both have to pay the price, but they would do so for each other, for the future they might never have had. The creature screeched in rage as the air around them crackled with energy, a final battle of wills about to unfold. The Duke and Eveline stood together, their hands still clasped, as the curse's power swirled around them. The last remnants of the Ravenspire bloodline's suffering, the last remnants of Isolde's anger, were about to be destroyed. In that moment, the truth of their love shone brighter than the darkness that threatened to consume them. And as the final act of the curse unraveled, Eveline felt the weight of her past self lift, replaced by the freedom to choose her own fate. The curse was broken. The villain was defeated. But at what cost? The world around Eveline seemed to blur, as if the very fabric of time and space was unraveling. She stood alone in the vast, empty chamber, the echoes of the final battle still reverberating in her mind. The immortal being, the curse that had plagued the Ravenspire bloodline for centuries, was no more. The dark magic had dissipated, leaving only silence in its wake. The Duke, no longer bound by the curse, stood a few paces away, his expression unreadable. The weight of their shared sacrifice hung in the air, and yet there was an unspoken understanding between them, a bond that transcended the physical and the supernatural. Eveline's heart ached as she turned to him, the realization of what had happened slowly sinking in. She had severed the bond, broken the curse, and freed them both. But it had come at a great cost. The love she had once shared with the Duke, though real and deep, was now gone, erased by the very magic that had cursed them. Eveline, the Duke's voice called her name softly, almost as if he were afraid to break the fragile silence. "You're leaving, aren't you?" Her breath caught in her throat, the reality of the situation finally hitting her. She nodded slowly, her chest tight with emotion. "I have to. The curse is broken and time is calling me back." The Duke's face was a mask of both longing and sorrow. "Will you remember me? Will you remember us?" Eveline felt her heart shatter at his words, the love that had once bound them together still burning deep within her. But the truth was undeniable. She had made her choice. She had broken the curse, and now she had to return to the world she had come from. She would leave behind the life she had known in the 18th century, the world of nobles and curses, of love and sacrifice. "I'll remember," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I will always remember you." The Duke took a step forward, his eyes searching hers, as though trying to hold on to her for just a moment longer. "Then let me give you something to remember me by." Before she could say anything, he reached out and gently cupped her face in his hands. His touch was warm, familiar, and it felt like home. His thumb brushed lightly across her cheek, a silent promise passing between them. "I'll always love you," he murmured, his voice breaking, "even if you can't stay." Tears welled up in Eveline's eyes as she reached up to hold his hands, her fingers trembling. "And I'll always love you," she replied, her voice steady despite the sorrow in her heart. "But love is sometimes not enough. I have to go, for both of us." He nodded, understanding in his eyes, and with a final lingering kiss, one filled with the ache of everything unsaid, they said their goodbyes. As their lips parted, the air around Eveline began to shimmer and swirl, the vortex of time beginning to pull her away. The Duke stepped back, watching her with a look of acceptance, though his heart would never truly let her go. Eveline gave him one last lingering glance, a silent promise that she would carry him with her, no matter where she went, no matter the time she was bound to, and with that, she was gone. Eveline woke with a start, the sensation of falling slowly fading from her senses. The sterile smell of the forensic lab filled her nose, the hum of fluorescent lights buzzing softly above her head. She blinked, disoriented, her heart racing in her chest. For a moment she thought she had dreamt it all. The 18th century, the curse, the Duke. But as her gaze drifted to her surroundings, the familiar tools of her trade greeted her, and she knew that she was back in the world she had once known. But something had changed, something profound. She glanced at the clock on her desk. It was as if no time had passed at all. The events of the past, of the Ravenspire family, the curse, and the Duke felt like a distant memory, a dream she had lived through. She stood up, her legs unsteady as if the weight of the world had been placed on her shoulders. And then, in the corner of her mind, a whisper of something lingered. A feeling, a memory that couldn't be explained. A love that had once been, but now could never be again. The feeling of the Duke's arms around her, his voice calling her name in that final moment, echoed in her heart, leaving a trace of warmth and sorrow. Eveline's fingers brushed against the locket she had worn since her reincarnation, a small, delicate thing she had found in her final moments with him. Inside, there was a picture, a portrait of a man with dark, brooding eyes and an expression full of longing. His eyes, though painted, seemed to look straight into her soul. The realization hit her then. Though she was back in her own time, the impact of the past had left a permanent mark on her life. History had changed because of her actions, and the legacy of the Ravenspire curse was now nothing but a forgotten story in the annals of time. Yet, she carried a piece of it with her, locked forever in her heart. Evelyn took a deep breath, the weight of the loss and the beauty of their love mingling inside her. As the wind outside howled, she closed her eyes for a moment, imagining the Duke standing by her side, offering her one last bittersweet smile. He was gone, lost to time, but their love, no matter how brief, had never truly ended. It had shaped her, and it would stay with her for the rest of her life.